The Lantern in the Storm Drain. Chapter 1. The Light Beneath the Pavement. Before we begin tonight's story, if you enjoy these quiet adventures with Walter Bramble, please consider subscribing and returning for another journey soon. Now, settle comfortably, and let us begin. Rain had been falling since mid-afternoon. Not the dramatic sort of rain that rattled windows or sent people hurrying for shelter. This was a gentler rain, a patient rain, the sort that polished pavements until they reflected street lamps like pools of liquid amber. Walter Bramble rather liked this kind of weather. Many people complained when the skies turned grey, but Walter had always thought rain encouraged the world to slow down a little. Cars travelled more carefully. People walked more thoughtfully. Even birds seemed less inclined to rush about. Walter adjusted the vintage patterned scarf around his neck and continued along the pavement at his usual pace. His old tweed flat cap sat securely on his head despite the drizzle. In one pocket rested the brass pocket watch that had belonged to his father. In the other was a small notebook. The notebook had once belonged to his late wife. She had been a librarian. Many years earlier, she had filled its pages with favourite quotations and observations. Walter now added his own notes whenever something caught his attention. And things caught Walter's attention rather often. For example, on this particular evening, he noticed that one of the rain droplets hanging from a wrought iron gate was almost perfectly spherical. He paused to admire it. The tiny droplet reflected an upside-down version of the entire street. The houses, the lamp-posts, the cloudy sky, all captured inside something smaller than a pea. "Remarkable," Walter murmured. He opened the notebook and wrote, "A whole street can fit inside a raindrop if one looks carefully enough." Satisfied, he slipped the notebook away. The town around him was settling into evening. Warm rectangles of yellow light glowed behind curtains. A distant television flickered through a bay window. Somewhere a kettle whistled. The smell of wood smoke drifted from a chimney. Walter always enjoyed these small signs of ordinary life. There was comfort in them. As he turned into a quieter road, he noticed something unusual. At first he thought it was simply a reflection, a street lamp perhaps, a passing car. But after several steps he realized the light remained exactly where it was. Golden, steady, almost hidden. Walter stopped. The light appeared to be shining through the bars of an old storm drain near the curb. He stared at it for a moment, then another. The sensible thing would have been to continue home. Most people would have done exactly that. But Walter Bramble had never possessed an especially large amount of sensible curiosity. He possessed a great deal of ordinary curiosity instead, and ordinary curiosity was often far more powerful. Carefully, he crossed the pavement. Rainwater trickled along the gutter. The golden glow shimmered beneath the iron grating. Walter crouched. His knees complained slightly. His back complained a little more. Nevertheless, he leaned closer. What have we here? The light appeared to be hanging several feet below the drain. At first it seemed impossible. Then his eyes adjusted. A tiny lantern, a genuine lantern, no larger than a teacup. It hung from a rusted hook fixed into the brickwork beneath the pavement. Walter blinked. The lantern remained exactly where it was. Its brass surface gleamed softly. Its flame burned without flickering despite the damp air. Now, that was peculiar. Walter glanced up and down the street. Nobody else appeared to have noticed it. The road was completely empty. Rain whispered softly around him. The lantern glowed below. For reasons he could not entirely explain, Walter felt as though it were waiting. Not merely existing, waiting. His heart beat a little faster. He removed his spectacles and wiped a droplet from one lens. When he looked again, the lantern was still there. The flame seemed slightly brighter. "Well," he said quietly, "you are certainly not ordinary." Walter reached a hand through the bars. His fingers brushed damp brick. The lantern remained just beyond reach. He stretched slightly farther. Still not enough. Then something unexpected happened. The iron grating moved. Not much. Just enough. It slid sideways with surprising ease. Walter froze. He was quite certain it should not have done that. Slowly he pushed again. The grate opened wider. A cool breath of air drifted upward. Not unpleasant, fresh somehow, like air after a thunderstorm. Walter peered into the darkness below. Stone steps, very old stone steps, descending beneath the street. His eyebrows rose. He had walked these roads for years, decades in fact. He had never seen any entrance here, never noticed any steps, never suspected anything existed beneath the pavement at all. The lantern continued glowing below. Patient, steady, inviting. Walter knew he should leave. He knew this perfectly well. A sensible, retired schoolteacher ought not to climb into mysterious underground passages on rainy evenings, yet the longer he stared, the more impossible leaving seemed. His notebook suddenly felt warm inside his pocket. That caught his attention. He pulled it out. The leather cover was dry despite the rain. Stranger still, the notebook had fallen open by itself. Walter looked down. One of his wife's favorite quotations stared back at him. The handwriting was instantly familiar. Elegant, neat, gentle. It read, "The world remains full of wonders for those willing to take one more step." Walter smiled. The words felt oddly appropriate, almost as though she had chosen them for this very moment. He stood quietly for several seconds. Rain tapped softly upon his cap. Finally, he nodded. "One more step, then." The stone staircase curved downward beneath the town. Walter descended cautiously. The sound of the rain gradually faded. 10 steps, 20, 30. The lantern's glow grew brighter. The air became warmer. Not warm exactly. Comfortable. Like entering an old conservatory after sunset. The staircase eventually ended. Walter stepped onto a narrow platform beside an underground stream. The sight before him stole his breath away. The tunnel stretched away into the distance. Brick arches curved overhead. Hundreds of lanterns hung from iron brackets. Golden reflections danced upon flowing water. Tiny bridges crossed the stream at intervals. Flower boxes overflowed with pale silver blossoms that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. It looked less like a tunnel, more like a hidden street, a forgotten neighborhood beneath the world. Walter stood absolutely still, not because he was frightened, because he was astonished. Far away, somewhere deeper in the underground darkness, a bell rang once, a low, musical note. Then silence returned. Walter became aware of another sound. Tick, tick, tick. A clock. Very distant, very large. Its slow rhythm echoed faintly through the tunnels. Walter listened. Something about the sound felt wrong, not broken exactly, but tired, as though each tick required considerable effort. Tick, pause, tick, longer pause, tick. The great unseen clock seemed to be struggling. Walter looked toward the tunnel, disappearing into the golden distance. His adventure had begun. Though he did not yet know it, somewhere beneath the town a clock was slowly stopping, and when it stopped completely, something precious would be lost forever. The lantern hanging beside the staircase brightened once more. Far ahead, another lantern answered, then another, and another, a trail of golden lights stretching into the unknown. Walter adjusted his spectacles, straightened his scarf, placed his wife's notebook safely back into his pocket, and followed the lights into the hidden world beneath the pavement. The last thing he heard before rounding the corner was the distant clock. Tick, pause, tick, pause, tick, growing weaker with every passing moment. Chapter 2. The Station of Forgotten Dreams. Walter Bramble followed the trail of lanterns. The hidden river flowed quietly beside him, carrying shimmering reflections through the underground world. Every so often he passed little doorways built into the brickwork. Some were no larger than garden sheds. Others resembled tiny cottages. Warm light glowed behind their windows. Flower boxes overflowed with silver-white blossoms. The place felt strangely lived in, not abandoned, not forgotten, simply hidden. Walter paused beside one cottage whose chimney released curls of blue smoke. A brass plaque beside the door read, "Keeper of Lost Umbrellas." Walter smiled. Further along stood another, "Custodian of Misplaced Spectacles." "Now that's a profession I could have used several times," he muttered. The notebook emerged from his pocket. He made another entry. Some jobs seem impossible until one discovers somebody is already doing them. As he closed the notebook, the distant clock sounded again. Tick. A pause. Tick. A longer pause. The sound echoed through the tunnels like a heartbeat growing weaker. Walter found himself listening carefully. Something about it troubled him. The rhythm felt wrong. A clock should be confident, certain. This one sounded tired. Ahead, the lantern trail curved beneath a stone archway. Beyond it, Walter began to hear another sound. A whistle. Not loud, not modern. A long, mournful railway whistle drifting through the darkness. He rounded the corner and stopped. Before him stood a railway station, an enormous underground railway station. It stretched farther than he could see. Stone platforms lined both sides of the river. Elegant iron bridges crossed overhead. Hundreds of lanterns hung from vaulted ceilings. The entire station glowed with warm gold light. Walter removed his spectacles, cleaned them, put them back on. The station remained. Large clocks hung from iron brackets. Porters pushed trolleys stacked with curious luggage. People moved quietly about the platforms. At least Walter assumed they were people. There was something unusual about them. They appeared slightly translucent. Not ghosts, not exactly, more like memories of people. Faint but gentle, as though they belonged to another place. A large sign hung above the nearest platform. It read, "Station of Forgotten Dreams." Walter stared. Beneath the sign, another notice listed departures. Platform 1. The mountain you nearly climbed. Platform 2. The novel you meant to write. Platform 3. The summer you always remember. Platform 4. Childhood adventures. Frequent service. Walter blinked. The departure board changed. New destinations appeared, new journeys, new possibilities. His curiosity grew stronger. A small brass bell rang. Far down the platform, a train emerged from a tunnel. Walter had seen many trains throughout his life. Steam trains, diesels, electric trains. This was unlike any of them. Its carriages appeared to be built from polished wood and moonlight. Warm, golden windows glowed from within. Tiny stars seemed to sparkle beneath its wheels. The locomotive rolled gently into the station. Steam drifted toward the ceiling. Its nameplate read, "Dreams in Transit." The train stopped. Doors opened. Passengers stepped out. Some carried old teddy bears. Others carried sketchbooks. One elderly gentleman held a kite. A woman carefully carried a box of seashells. All wore expressions of quiet wonder. Walter watched in fascination. Then something nudged his hand. He looked down. A dog sat beside him. At least it resembled a dog. Its outline shimmered with pale silver light. Tiny stars glittered beneath its fur. Its eyes glowed like distant constellations. Walter had never seen anything remotely similar. The dog wagged its tail. Where the tail moved, little sparks drifted through the air. "Well now," Walter said softly. The dog barked. The sound resembled a tiny bell. Walter crouched. The creature sat patiently. Its expression reminded him strongly of certain dogs he had known over the years. Friendly, intelligent, slightly mischievous. The dog stretched out a paw. Walter shook it. The paw felt surprisingly real, warm too. The creature appeared pleased. It spun around once before trotting away. After several steps it stopped, looked back, then barked again. Walter recognized the gesture immediately. "You want me to follow?" The dog barked. Walter smiled. "Very well." Together they crossed the station. As they walked, Walter noticed curious objects stacked everywhere. Suitcases, boxes, trunks, cabinets. Each carried handwritten labels. One suitcase read, "First bicycle ride." Another, "Snowfall, seen from bedroom window, age 9." A wooden chest carried a brass plate. "Things I meant to say." Walter found himself slowing. The labels stirred memories. Not specific memories, the feeling of memories. The strange warmth, that accompanies moments long gone. Near the center of the station stood an enormous map. Golden lines spread across it like railway routes. Walter approached. The starlight dog sat beside him. The map depicted the hidden underground world. Dozens of locations appeared. The river of old songs, the orchard of remembered summers, the hall of lost letters, the valley of forgotten faces, and near the very center, a great circular symbol, larger than all the others. Around it were written the words, "The Great Clock." Walter's eyes narrowed. Several routes leading toward the clock had been crossed out. Others appeared faded. One route blinked weakly, as though struggling to remain visible. Suddenly the station lights dimmed, only for a second. But Walter noticed. So did everyone else. Passengers paused. Porters stopped pushing their trolleys. The train whistle fell silent. Then the distant clock sounded again. Tick. The pause lasted much longer. Tick. Another pause. A murmur spread through the station. Concern. Worry. Unease. The starlight dog lowered its ears. Walter looked around. For the first time since arriving, the hidden world felt anxious. The dog nudged his hand, then turned toward a small office at the far end of the platform. Light glowed beneath the door. Walter followed. Inside sat an elderly station master. He wore a dark blue uniform covered with brass buttons. His beard reached almost to his waist. Spectacles balanced on the end of his nose. He seemed unsurprised to see Walter. "Ah," said the station master. "You've arrived." Walter blinked. "You were expecting me?" The station master nodded. "Eventually." He opened a ledger thicker than a paving stone, turned several pages, and pointed. There, written neatly in ink, were the words, "Walter Bramble." Today's date appeared beside the entry. Walter stared. "How on earth?" "The lantern chose you." The station master closed the book. "The lantern is rarely wrong." Walter sat carefully in a nearby chair. The starlight dog settled beside him. "The clock is failing, isn't it?" Walter asked. The station master's expression darkened. "Yes." The answer came quietly. "Every time it weakens, something is lost." Walter thought of the strange suitcases, the labels, the memories, the dreams. "Lost from here." The station master shook his head. "Lost from everywhere." Silence filled the office. Outside, another whistle echoed through the station. Walter suddenly understood. The hidden world beneath the town was not merely storing forgotten things. It was protecting them, guarding them, keeping them safe. And whatever powered that protection was beginning to fail. The station master looked toward the ceiling, listening. Tick. Pause. Tick. The sound seemed weaker than ever. "You'll need to reach the clockmaker's hall," he said. The starlight dog immediately stood, its ears lifted. It clearly recognized the destination. "The clockmaker's hall?" Walter asked. The station master nodded. "Follow your guide." The dog wagged its glowing tail. "The path won't be easy." Walter smiled faintly. "Most worthwhile journeys rarely are." The station master seemed pleased by that answer. He handed Walter a small brass ticket. The words engraved upon it simply read, "Remember." Walter slipped the ticket into his pocket beside his wife's notebook. Outside the office, the great station continued its quiet activity. But now he could feel the urgency beneath it. The hidden world was waiting for the clock to be saved, waiting for something to change, waiting perhaps for Walter himself. The starlight dog padded toward a tunnel marked Clockmaker's Hall. Walter adjusted his scarf, checked that his notebook was safe, then followed his glowing companion into the darkness. Far behind them, the station of forgotten dreams slowly disappeared from view. Ahead lay deeper mysteries, and somewhere in the hidden world, the great clock continued its struggle. Tick. Long pause. Tick, growing fainter with every passing minute. Chapter 3. The Great Clock. The tunnel leading from the station of forgotten dreams seemed older than everything Walter had seen so far. The brickwork gradually gave way to stone. The warm lanterns became fewer, the silence became deeper. Only the starlight dog moved confidently ahead. Its glowing paws left tiny constellations upon the path. Walter followed carefully. The brass ticket marked "Remember" felt unusually warm in his pocket. Ever so often the great clock sounded. Tick. Pause. A longer pause. Tick. The sound echoed through the tunnels like a tired giant struggling to stay awake. The further they traveled, the weaker it became. Walter found himself walking faster. Eventually, the tunnel widened. A pair of enormous doors appeared ahead. They were made from dark wood, reinforced with brass bands. Thousands of tiny names had been carved into their surface. Walter stepped closer. Some names were old. Some seemed recent. Some appeared almost worn away. Above the doors hung a sign. The Clockmaker's Hall. The starlight dog stopped. For the first time since they had met, it looked nervous. Walter gently scratched behind its ears. The dog relaxed immediately. "Whatever is inside," Walter said quietly, "we shall face it together." The doors slowly opened. Walter stepped inside and stopped. The hall beyond was vast, larger than any cathedral he had ever seen, larger than any railway station, larger than seemed possible beneath a town. The ceiling disappeared into darkness high above. Thousands of lanterns floated through the air. Great bronze gears turned slowly along the walls. Silver pendulums swung in perfect rhythm. And at the center stood the great clock. Walter stared. The clock towered above everything. Its face was larger than a house. Golden hands stretched across a dial filled with stars instead of numbers. Massive gears surrounded it. Wheels, chains, mechanisms, all moving slowly, too slowly. The great pendulum beneath the clock barely moved. Tick. A pause. Tick. The clock was dying. Around its base stood dozens of caretakers. the keeper of lost umbrellas, the custodian of misplaced spectacles. Others Walter had not yet met. All watched anxiously. None seemed able to help. Then Walter noticed someone seated beneath the clock, an elderly man, perhaps older than anyone Walter had ever seen. He sat beside a workbench covered in tiny tools. His silver beard reached the floor. His eyes remained fixed upon the clock. He did not speak. The starlight dog approached him immediately. The old man smiled faintly. Then he looked at Walter. His eyes were kind, tired, and very sad. "The clockmaker?" Walter asked. The old man nodded. "Can it be repaired?" The clockmaker looked upward, then slowly shook his head. Walter frowned. "If it isn't broken, why is it stopping?" The old man raised one finger, then pointed toward the clock. Walter followed his gaze. At first he saw nothing unusual. Then he noticed. The clock was not powered by springs, nor weights, nor gears. Not entirely. Tiny lights drifted through its workings, thousands of them, millions perhaps, each no larger than a firefly. Some glowed brightly, others flickered weakly. Many had already vanished. Walter watched them carefully. "What are they?" The clockmaker finally spoke. His voice was soft as dust. "Memories." The single word echoed through the hall. Walter understood immediately. The clock was powered by remembrance. Every cherished memory, every treasured moment, every forgotten kindness, every story, every dream, every precious fragment of life, all contributed to its strength. The clockmaker sighed. "People remember less." Walter looked confused. "How can people remember less?" The old man smiled sadly. "They hurry." He pointed upward, toward the world above. "They rush from place to place." Another gesture. "They notice less." Another. "They treasure less." Walter thought about it. The clockmaker continued. "They forget small things." The words lingered. Walter remembered the suitcase labeled "First Bicycle Ride." The chest marked "Things I Meant to Say." The station of forgotten dreams. The river of old songs. The hidden world depended upon people remembering the moments that mattered. And fewer people seemed to pause long enough to remember. The clock weakened. The hidden world faded. And eventually everything stored here would disappear. The starlight dog rested its head upon Walter's knee. The clockmaker looked at him, then pointed toward the notebook in Walter's pocket. Walter slowly removed it. His wife's notebook. The leather cover felt warm. The clockmaker nodded. Understanding dawned. "Tell a memory." The old man smiled. Walter opened the notebook. For a moment he simply stared at the pages. Then he began. He spoke of a summer afternoon many years ago, a picnic beside a river, his wife laughing because a determined duck had stolen half their sandwiches. As he spoke, one tiny light drifted upward, then another. The clock brightened slightly. The caretakers noticed. Walter continued. He described learning to ride a bicycle, falling repeatedly, his father running alongside him, the feeling of triumph when he finally stayed upright. More lights appeared. The pendulum swung a little further. The clockmaker watched. Hope slowly returned to his eyes. Walter carried on. He remembered the smell of old books, the creak of school desks, his first classroom, his mother's garden, the first snowfall he could remember, the day he met his wife, the final walk they had taken together. His voice occasionally wavered, but he continued, because these memories mattered, every single one. The hall grew brighter. The tiny lights multiplied. Caretakers began sharing memories too. Then more joined in. Soon stories filled the hall. A remembered birthday, a childhood dog, a favorite song, a first dance, a summer holiday, a wedding, a friendship, a simple evening beside a fire. The great clock glowed. The pendulum swung further. Tick, tick, tick. The pauses disappeared. The sound strengthened. The rhythm returned. Walter smiled. The hidden world was waking again. The clockmaker stood slowly. For the first time in many years he laughed. The sound echoed through the hall like music. The starlight dog barked happily. Stars danced from its tail. The great clock now shone like a golden sun. Its gears turned smoothly. Its hands moved steadily. Its heartbeat had returned. Tick, tick, tick. The hidden world had been saved. Not by magic, not by machinery, but by remembering. Hours later, or perhaps only moments, Walter found himself standing once more beside the original storm drain. Rain still fell softly. The street remained empty. The town was quiet. Had any time passed at all? Walter wasn't entirely certain. The iron grate had closed again. The staircase had vanished. Only the tiny brass lantern remained. Its flame glowed gently beneath the pavement. Walter smiled, then began walking home. The following morning something felt different, subtle, yet unmistakable. A neighbor stopped to tell him about a dog he had owned as a child. The baker mentioned a holiday from 40 years earlier. 2 school children laughed while discussing a game their grandparents used to play. Everywhere Walter went, people seemed to be remembering things, small things, wonderful things, important things. Life felt a little warmer, a little slower, a little kinder. That evening, Walter opened his wife's notebook. On the final page, he discovered something he had never noticed before. A line written in her familiar handwriting. Perhaps it had always been there. Perhaps it had not. It read, "The smallest memories are often the ones that light the way home." Walter sat quietly for a long time. Then he smiled. Outside, rain tapped softly against the window. And somewhere beneath the town, hidden far below the pavement, a great clock continued to tick. Strong, steady, and full of light. Thank you for joining Walter Bramble on this adventure. If you enjoyed the story, please consider subscribing and returning for another journey soon. Until next time, good night.